My sisters and brothers, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth nations will be in dismay, perplexed by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will die of fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. But when these signs begin to happen, stand erect and raise your heads, because your redemption is at hand. Beware that your hearts do not become drowsy from carousing and drunkenness and the anxieties of daily life, and that day catch you by surprise like a trap. For that day will assault everyone who lives on the face of the earth. Be vigilant at all times, and pray that you have the strength to escape the tribulations that are imminent and to stand before the Son of Man." The Gospel of the Lord.
As we look at the readings beginning this season of Advent, we can definitely see both in Jeremiah and in the Gospel today that our lives today are not that much different than those of thousands of years ago. What do I mean by that? There's basically in these 4 weeks of Advent that go all so quick, there's a tension created in the readings. There's a deliberate tension in the readings, probably a deliberate tension that exists in our own lives. It's a tension between what we already know and what we hope is yet to come. There's a tension in the readings between promises made and the looking forward for the fulfillment. There's a tension between expectation and deliverance. There's a tension between looking forward while at the same time knowing what is and what has been. Advent creates that tension for us, and really it's a tension we probably all live with in a very, very human way. If you think for a moment, all of us really live with that tension of knowing where we are and having some idea of where we want to be. We kind of know that tension, and there's usually a sense of urgency, just as there was a sense of urgency in Jeremiah's time for the Jewish people. Definitely a sense of urgency in the apostles in the time of Jesus. Definitely a sense of urgency, meaning the call of Advent for you, for me today. There's an urgency that we live our personal lives with. We're to transfer that urgency in a religious sense. And we really live with that urgency almost all of our life, with a sense that we cannot wait for what is yet to come. If you really think about it, it's true. From the time that we're very small, we can't wait. There's almost an urgency. We want to be with our older brothers and sisters or the older kids in the neighborhood in school. We can't wait till we get there. Once we get to school, we generally can't wait until, we get to second grade to make our first penance. And once we make our first penance, we can't wait until we make our first Holy Communion in third grade. Once we make our first Holy Communion in third grade, we can't wait till we get to junior high, so we're with the older kids. And once we make it to junior high, we can't wait till we get to 8th grade, because we know we'll graduate. And once we begin 8th grade, we can't wait until we graduate. And once we graduate, we really can't wait till we get to high school to further our education and move on with our lives. And once we get to high school religiously, we can't wait till we make our confirmation. And certainly around the same time, we can't wait until we get our driver's license. And once we get our driver's license, we can't wait till we get our own car. And once we have our own car, then we can't wait to graduate from high school. And once we graduate from high school, we can't wait till we go to college. And once we get to college, we certainly can't wait till we graduate, so we see how much work is involved in college. And once we graduate from college, we can't wait till we get our own apartment and live in our own. And once we live in our own, we can't wait till we meet the right girl, the right guy, and settle down and get married. And once we get married, we can't wait until we have enough money to buy our first house. And once we buy our first house, then we can't wait till we have kids. And once we have kids, we can't wait for them to start kindergarten and go to their first penance and first communion. We can't wait for them to graduate from 8th grade. We can't wait for them to get to high school. We certainly can't wait for them to get confirmed. We can wait for them to start driving and be put on our insurance. That we can wait for. And once that takes place, we can't wait for them to start college. We can't wait for them to graduate. We certainly can't wait for them to get their own apartment. And then once they have that apartment, we can't wait for them to find their right girl or right guy to settle down and get married. And once they're married, we can't wait until they have children, because that means we have grandchildren. And once we have grandchildren, we can't wait for them to come and visit, huh? And about an hour or two into that, we can't wait for them to go home. How many of you agree? We have that sense of urgency, that sense of not being able to wait, huh? If you take all that in the physical sense, and we know what it's like on the physical level, to the tensions of the Scripture and really the season, and really the deeper meaning of what the season of Advent calls us, it's not just marking days and weeks to get the cards and cookies and gifts, but a deeper reality. We live in that tension of what is already but not yet. We know what our lives are like, but we have some hope, not only physically for where we would like to be, but most importantly, spiritual and life eternal. There's a sense of promise. We heard about that in Jeremiah. They lived with the promise and the looking forward with hope for the fulfillment of that promise, the Messiah to be born. Similarly, in Luke's gospel, we hear the same thing, that there's the promise of a Messiah. The apostles know that Jesus is He. They are looking for the fulfillment to be a political regime. They don't yet fully understand the fullness of that promise, the fulfillment in the kingdom of heaven. There's expectation both in Jeremiah and in the gospel, looking for that deliverance, that freedom, and there's that looking forward. What is it going to be like? And we hear that snapshot in the gospel today as we know the reality of the present and the past. Certainly, Israel lived within a tension. They lived in an anticipation. They lived knowing that God would fulfill their lives. And as we enter into Advent this year, perhaps we need to ask the same question, just as we have that sense of urgency, that sense of not being able to wait for physical things. Can we transfer that to our spiritual life? Are we like Israel? Can we be like Israel, to have that desire to know God, that anticipation for the heavenly kingdom, the tension of knowing that God is going to come and fulfill all of these promises? Do you have that urgency for the kingdom of heaven in a greater way than anything physical in this world?